In the last 50 years, rates of irritable bowel syndrome have increased by over 200%. Celiac disease has quadrupled. Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, leaky gut, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. All of them rising in lockstep with the same 50-year period. And in that same 50 years, we did something to wheat and barley that no civilization in 10,000 years of grain cultivation had ever done before. We removed the part that fed the gut. The ancient Israelites ate wheat and barley whole, ground between stones, baked with the bran intact, the fiber present, the germ alive. A 2024 study published in NPJ Science of Food, a Nature journal, found that barley beta-glucan consumption improves glucose tolerance by altering gut microbiota composition and increasing intestinal succinate concentrations. Published in Nature's Journal. In 2024, about a grain that ancient Israel ate for breakfast every morning for 3,000 years. This is the story of wheat and barley, the two grains that built civilization, fed armies, and sustained profits. And what happened to the human gut the moment we decided we knew better than 3 millennia of daily practice. Wheat and barley are the first two items listed in the 7 species of Deuteronomy 8:8. Not by accident. They were the foundation of everything. Barley ripens first, in the spring, at Passover, which is why the Passover offering to the temple was barley. It was the bread of the Exodus, the grain of liberation, the food that sustained the Israelites as they left Egypt. Wheat ripens later, at Shavuot, Pentecost, and the 2 loaves of wheat bread brought to the temple on that day represented the first fruits of the harvest season. The agricultural calendar of ancient Israel was structured around the harvest cycles of these 2 grains. Barley was considered the grain of the common people, hardier, more drought-resistant, cheaper, more widely available. Ruth gleans barley from Boaz's field. The feeding of the 5,000 in John's Gospel uses 5 barley loaves, the food of ordinary people. Wheat was the finer grain, used for priestly offerings, for royal households, for special occasions. Together, they covered the full nutritional range of ancient Israel, from the poorest widow grinding her last handful to the priests preparing temple offerings with the finest flour. And both were eaten in the same fundamental way, whole, stone ground, with every part of the grain intact. The key to understanding what ancient wheat and barley were doing to the human body, and what refined modern versions are no longer doing, is a fiber called beta-glucan. Beta-glucans are naturally occurring non-starch polysaccharides found primarily in oats, barley, and wheat. The proportion of beta-glucan varies between cereal sources. There is more beta-glucan content in barley at 7% than in oats at 5%. 7% beta-glucan in barley, the grain that ancient Israel ate every day. And what does beta-glucan actually do? The fermentation of beta-glucans by gut microbiota in the colon results in the production of short-chain fatty acids, including butyrate, acetate, and propionate. These SCFAs are essential metabolites that serve as an energy source for colonic epithelial cells, modulate inflammation, and maintain the intestinal barrier's integrity. SCFAs also help lower the gut pH, creating an environment that encourages the growth of beneficial microbes while inhibiting the proliferation of harmful bacteria. Butyrate, the short-chain fatty acid that feeds the cells lining your colon. The compound that, when deficient, is now understood to be a primary driver of inflammatory bowel conditions. The ancient Israelite eating whole barley bread every morning was producing butyrate in their gut every single day. The modern consumer eating white bread, from which the bran, germ, and fiber have been removed, produces almost none. In the last decade, the gut microbiome has emerged as one of the most important frontiers in all of medicine. The 38 trillion microorganisms living in your gut regulate your immune system, your mood, your metabolism, your inflammatory response, and your risk of dozens of chronic diseases. And the single most important factor determining the health of that microbiome is dietary fiber. Not protein, not fat, not vitamins, fiber. Specifically, the kind of fiber found in whole, ancient grains. Barley's high molecular weight beta-glucan content acts as a prebiotic, promotes gut health through microbiome modulation and short-chain fatty acid production, potentially preventing colon cancer and boosting immunity. A double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized clinical trial, the gold standard of medical evidence, found that consuming bread containing 6 grams of barley beta-glucan daily for 4 weeks decreased total plasma cholesterol, significantly increased propionic acid in feces, and measurably changed the composition of the gut microbiome. Bread. For 4 weeks. Changing the gut microbiome. That's not a supplement trial, that's a food trial. And the food was barley, the same grain ancient Israel baked with daily. Meta-analyses have demonstrated a notably reduced risk of all-cause mortality ranging from 16 to 30% among individuals consuming high-fiber diets. Dietary fibers significantly reduce glucose absorption and mitigate the inflammatory response mediated by gut microbiota. High-fiber diets increase microbiome diversity and short-chain fatty acid-producing bacteria, which are key mediators of gut health. 16 to 30% reduced risk of all-cause mortality. From eating fiber. The fiber that ancient Israel consumed in every meal, because they had never thought to remove it. Here's where the story reaches its most surprising chapter. Because the gut doesn't just affect digestion. The gut and the brain are in continuous, bidirectional communication through what researchers call the gut-brain axis, a network of nerves, hormones, and immune signals that makes the gut, in the words of researchers, the second brain. And beta-glucan from barley, the fiber that feeds the gut, has been shown to directly affect cognitive function. Previous clinical studies found that the consumption of dietary fiber is positively correlated with cognition in mid-age or elderly people. 3 different types of beta-glucans have shown benefits on brain function, gut microbiome, and immune response. Dietary fiber, positively correlated with cognition. In published clinical studies, think about what this means for the ancient Israelite eating whole barley bread every morning. Every slice was feeding the gut bacteria that produce butyrate. That butyrate was maintaining the gut wall. The healthy gut was signaling the brain through the vagus nerve. The brain was receiving anti-inflammatory signals from a microbiome fed on precisely the fiber it was designed to thrive on. The ancient world didn't have a mental health epidemic. Anxiety, depression, brain fog, cognitive decline at 50. These are modern phenomena, correlated with, among many factors, the disappearance from the diet of the very fiber that ancient Israel ground into its daily bread. The industrialization of grain milling is one of the most consequential and least discussed dietary changes in human history. For 10,000 years, grain was ground between stones. The process was slow, inefficient, and imprecise, but it left the grain largely intact, bran, germ, and endosperm together as nature assembled them. In the 1870s, the steel roller mill was invented. It could process grain faster than any stone mill. And it produced a fine white flour that didn't go rancid, because the germ, with its oils, had been removed. White flour could be stored indefinitely. It could be transported globally. It was profitable. But the bran and germ, the parts that contained the fiber, the beta-glucan, the B vitamins, the minerals, were sold as animal feed. Within decades of widespread white flour adoption, deficiency diseases began appearing at epidemic rates: pellagra, beriberi, vitamin deficiencies that had been essentially unknown in populations eating whole grain. The response was to fortify the white flour, adding back a few synthetic vitamins to replace the dozens of natural compounds that had been removed. But you cannot add beta-glucan back to white flour. You cannot fortify a prebiotic back into refined grain. The gut microbiome doesn't respond to synthetic fortification the way it responds to the whole ancient grain. Beta-glucans from cereals act as prebiotics that promote the growth of beneficial gut bacteria, enhancing gut health and immune function. The recommended daily intake is 3 to 5 grams for adults, typically sourced from oats or barley, for cholesterol reduction and gastrointestinal health benefits. 3 to 5 grams daily, from whole grain. The ancient Israelite eating whole barley bread at every meal was consuming this effortlessly, naturally, as part of a diet that had been optimized by 10,000 years of human experience. We refined it away in 50 years, and our guts have been paying the price ever since. The path back is not complicated, but it requires understanding what you're actually looking for. First, whole grain, not whole wheat. In most commercial products, whole wheat means refined flour with some bran added back. True whole grain means the complete kernel, bran, germ, and endosperm ground together. Look for stone-ground whole grain flour or whole kernel products. Second, barley deserves a place at your table. It has nearly double the beta-glucan content of oats, and it was the foundational grain of the ancient world. Barley soup, barley porridge, whole pearl barley as a rice substitute. Any of these restores what your gut was designed to receive. Third, slow fermentation changes everything. Ancient bread was almost certainly made with sourdough cultures. Wild fermentation that pre-digests some of the anti-nutrients in grain and makes the remaining nutrients more bioavailable. Modern sourdough from whole grain flour is the closest available equivalent to what ancient Israel ate every day. The grain that fed the Passover, that Ruth gleaned from Boaz's fields, that the psalmist sang about as the gift of a good land, is the same grain that a 2024 study published in a Nature journal confirmed improves glucose metabolism through gut microbiome modulation. The ancient world ate it by intuition. We are finally understanding it by science. 2 grains, listed first in the 7 species, not by accident. They were the foundation, nutritionally, agriculturally, spiritually, of a civilization. And the fiber they contained was feeding gut bacteria that produced the compounds that maintained the gut wall, that signaled the brain, that regulated inflammation, that may have protected against the chronic diseases that now define modern life. We didn't discover gut health. We rediscovered what ancient Israel never lost. Episode 5 investigates the fig, a fruit so dense in calcium that ancient populations who ate it daily never needed dairy for bone health. And what modern osteoporosis research is now confirming about what we lost when figs disappeared from the Western diet. It's there when you're ready.